Hi, I'm Charlie Macchia. Welcome to Brainovision. And now, allow me to introduce you to your enemy. That's right, confusion. Yes, folks, we are gathered here today to try to clear up some of that nasty confusion business we all have to face without adding yet still more to the pile. So the only problem is, where do we even start? Let's see what these little pearls of wisdom might have to say. At the beginning. Well then, I guess we'll first have to see if slicing through all that confusion is even possible. You see, if the world is fundamentally impossible to understand, then why even bother trying to understand it? Oh, the challenge of what can we know isn't some new kind of trick question. There's actually a word for it, epistemology. And it goes back at least 2,000 years before even Carneades first annoyed the Romans with it.
Go away.
Which brings us to today's main event. We're going to have to take our best shot at answering the "is the world fundamentally impossible to understand" question once and for all. And there's only one way to do that. We're going to have to do a little test. Now don't worry, it's mostly painless, well, last I checked anyway. But it does require your participation. Yes, your participation. Okay, get ready. Hang on. Sorry to interrupt, but there's one minor point I should probably mention. You see, by the end of this test, you're going to have a pretty good idea if we're all just lost forever, trapped inside of our own personal fairy tales, as some people like to think. Or if we have a pretty good shot at understanding something, anything, about the world around us. Okay then, here we go. First, a couple of warm-ups. See if you can follow these instructions.
In 3, 2, 1, action!
Please touch your nose. How'd that go? Pretty good? Great. Okay then, on to the next, even more abstract maneuver.
Action!
Imagine, if you would, a double scoop of yummy, scrumptious, and utterly delicious chocolate ice cream in a cone.
How'd that go? Good? Okay then, great. Since it's real important we get this right, we better check how we're doing so far. So, announcer.
Thanks, Charlie. In response to the touch your nose stimulus, you either did or, being a little shy, at least thought of doing something like the following. Option A or Option B.
Now for the next results.
In response to the yummy ice cream cone stimulus, one of the following images was very similar to what entered your mind. Option A or Option B.
Did you select Option A in both cases? Good. I knew you were a smart bunch. In fact, I think you guys are so with it, we don't really need a step number 3. Well, if the world is impossible to understand, how do you suppose you managed to follow those instructions and do this? Or, think of this. Mysteriously impenetrable universes shouldn't be letting my instructions sneak their way through. Okay, so you understood my instructions, my words. Well, so what? What does that prove? It proves the world is, to some degree at least, understandable. Oh, we're getting a caller. Maybe there's a few objections out there. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, but words, they're just sounds. The meanings they have are completely arbitrary. The only meanings they have are the meanings we've agreed to give them. Those meanings don't exist out there in the real world. Sincerely, semiological guy.
Okay, but if what you say is true, and the outside world also happens to be impossible to understand, then how do we ever manage to agree to the meaning of those words in the first place? And there's the rub, because to communicate at all, people have to find some agreement on word meanings. Yet if the world is unknowable, and the sound of words is arbitrary, could any agreement even be possible? To find out, try picturing the world as some people believe it is, like an impenetrable wall of mystery. And it's here we bump into the first problem. Impenetrable walls of mystery shouldn't be offering us clues about anything. Let alone the meanings of unknown words. But then, if the outside world has no clues to help us understand each other, we'd be forced to rely entirely on something already built into us. Like, for example, an extremely accurate decoder key that lets us match any word with its meaning. But hang on. If the sound of words is completely arbitrary, as the caller mentioned, then no such decoder key exists, so that's not possible either. And there's the catch. If this whole mysterious world, arbitrary word sounds concept were entirely true, we'd have no better chance of understanding each other than of understanding a disconnected television. So we find ourselves on the horns of a dilemma. On the one side, an impenetrable universe offering no clues to word meanings, and on the other, no more than a random association between sounds and their meanings. Add it all up and you get no chance of language, since it would be impossible to figure out what anybody meant by a sound. So clearly something's got to give, because language really does exist, so either
The world really isn't totally mysterious, but in fact is at least somewhat understandable, and therefore some knowledge of the outside world, like a clue to the meanings of a word, really is possible.
Translation: since the world isn't totally mysterious, we use it to figure out what words mean. Or
the sound of words just appears to be arbitrary. In reality, we're born with the ability to unlock the meanings of any word. Knowledge of the outside world is not necessary. In fact, it's only an illusion.
Translation: since all meanings are internally constructed, no outside information is necessary, which is good because no outside information really exists. Word agreement only appears to happen because language patterns are pre-built into us. In short, word sounds aren't arbitrary. So we've just seen two ways to explain the existence of language. Either the world really isn't as unknowable or mysterious as some people think, or word sounds aren't really arbitrary at all. But which explanation makes the most sense? Well, there is good reason to think that word sounds can't be quite 100% arbitrary. After all, we don't have ultrasonic vowels, for instance, and a lot of the ways we learn and structure a language seems to be built into our DNA. But still, that's a long, long way from being born with entire matching dictionaries in our heads, or having secret language decoder keys that require no external knowledge or learning whatsoever. So if language is real, and I think that's a fairly safe assumption, and agreement on word meanings can't be found through non-existent secret decoder keys or perfectly defined DNA dictionaries, then unless a billion people just happen to invent, in parallel, the same English language by pure coincidence alone, somehow we must be using clues from the external world to help us find agreement on word meanings, which means the external world can't be totally mysterious. And therefore our understandings of it, far from always being mere subjective illusions, are often quite capable of accurately representing it. Otherwise, not only could we not understand each other, but trying to cross a street like this would be as good of an idea as any. So yes, there are some things we really can, to some degree, understand. Otherwise, language itself would be impossible. Oh, we have another caller.
Okay, fine, but why is this so important? And how does it cut through the confusion of everyday life?
Well, when some knowledge is possible, it means everything can't always be just a matter of opinion. And that's good news, because then trying to figure things out is no longer a hopeless case. But that realization doesn't come for free. We can never again just throw up our hands and say, hey, why bother? Knowledge is impossible. Because, ironically, the moment you successfully communicate the idea that knowledge is impossible to someone else, you instantly disprove your theory. So how far does our knowledge go? Well, we don't know yet. We may never know. But we do know there's only one way to find out. We have to look.